Welcome back to the Sunday Serving channel, where you come every week for words of hope and truth. Today we should say, and salt from the gospel. And I hope you're enjoying listening to these sessions. I'm really excited to be able to talk about Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. They're so important. And last week we talked about the Beatitudes, the Blesseds. Jesus' upside-down way of values that we should be living by, that are about love, that are about humility, forgiveness. And the cool thing was it ended with, we should rejoice. Like if people insult us, we shouldn't be bothered by it. We should rejoice about that. So that's pretty cool. So today let's go on with the Beatitudes. After the Beatitudes, Jesus talks about the salt and the light, how we should be salt and light of the earth. This big old block here looks a bit like a salt block. I think I could do this by memory, but we'll pull out the device here. I don't want to miss a word. Don't want to miss a word from the gospel. So you can find it here. Matthew chapter 5, carrying on after the Beatitudes. It takes a while. A normal Bible would be a lot faster, but pages blow away in the wind. So Matthew chapter 5, starting at verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So let's think about that a bit. So Jesus is telling us we, his followers, are to be the salt of the earth. What is salt? Today, I guess salt is mostly a flavoring, a seasoning, right? We add it to our food. It's interesting. I don't know what you add salt to, but I like it on meat. Of course, you like salty things when you like potato chips, add it to tomatoes. I had a teacher in school that would put salt on watermelon and cantaloupe. I always thought that was funny, but then I tried it, and it really brought out the flavor. So salt brings out the flavor in food. But much more than that, salt is very important, and in especially the older civilization, they realized that a lot more. Salt was a preservative. It preserved food, especially meat, to enable it to last. So civilizations really relied on it. They rose and fell on the availability of salt. And the whole history of salt is fascinating. Roads sprung up that followed trails that went to salt mines where they mined the salt out of the earth. And later on, they learned how to make salt out of seawater. And it was a currency. In fact, the old traders I've read traded salt on a gram for gram basis like gold. That's how important it was. It's also important in our cells, in our biology. Salt, sodium chloride, two ionic chemicals or elements that combine together ionically, and then they separate in solution. And each one is so important for life in our cells. Our nerves function because of the sodium. The chloride's just as important. So salt is so important. And I think what Jesus is saying, he's not trying to give us a science lesson. What he's saying is that our love and obedience to Christ should affect the world around us. It should flavor it. It should preserve it. It should preserve the love and the law of God, his will for life, for living, for family, for love. The true heart of God's law. We need to affect the world around us. And if we don't affect the world around us, if it's just in words, if it's just something we believe but hold separate from affecting our communities, our families, anybody we meet, then we've lost our salt. So the love, the joy we have, the belief in Christ, we need to share that like salt. So it's so much more than just the flavor. It's everything. It's so important to life. So that we are the salt of the earth. Going on, it says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl or a bushel, but instead they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So same thing there, light. How important is light? Light is equated to life, to love. It illuminates things. We can't see without light. We equate it to the sun. The light of the sun is so life-giving. It drives photosynthesis, the production of sugar and food. It creates, without light, there's no life. And of course, we wouldn't be able to see anything, see the world around us. So Jesus is the light. He illuminates. He brings us life-giving warmth from God. So the Jesus' love in our hearts has to be the light to the world. Same thing, we can't hide it. You have to show it. If it's in your heart, show it. Show it to others by good deeds, by smiling, by loving gestures, by giving that cup of water or that bit of food to someone who's hungry, by an encouraging word. So the light and the salt, the light, the warmth, the love, salt, sometimes the saltiness, the flavor. I think that's also standing up for truth. To say an unpleasant truth, say, hey, that's not right. How important is that today with everything going nuts around us in the world, to stick to the truth, to say what is true? Well, God created the world like this. There are men, there are women. Family and marriage is important. That we need to love and forgive each other. Tell a hard truth, that's sometimes salt, but do it in love, that's light. The salt and light of the earth, those are so important teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. And we should go on here to get the next section in today. It's about law. I think it's also important, maybe a little harder. I don't know if I fully understand it, but let's read it here and talk about it. Do not think that I have come, Jesus said, to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And this last sentence, this one's interesting. For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and of the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. So this part about law, that of course the Old Testament, the law of Moses, was given by God to the people in order for them to understand God's love and will for them, and to show that obedience is important. Obedience to God is important. Now, in the Jewish culture, there was all these laws were followed very carefully, and the Pharisees, he talks about the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they were very concerned in following those laws to the letter. And I think Jesus is pointing here with this passage that we have to, if our righteousness has to be greater than the Pharisees, that's not talking about following every law to the letter and making ourselves look holy and pious and dressing just right and all that. I don't think that's what it is. It's the heart of the law. If we don't get back to the heart of what God intended for his people and understand it more than those the Pharisees that just followed the letter, if we don't understand the heart of it, then we will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Our righteousness, the goodness that comes from God, it should be from God, not from our own power, has to exceed that legalism, really. It has to be more part of the heart of God. And it's interesting, in other parts of the Bible, Jesus talks about this. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. That's the most important thing. And love your neighbor as yourself. Doesn't that point to the heart of the law? And I think that's what Jesus is referring to here. That has to be in our hearts. That has to be important to us. And that's not abolishing any letter of the law. That is fulfilling the whole law that God gave to his people, to Moses, and then gave Jesus to show the full fulfillment of that law. And this teaching here in the Sermon on the Mount is such a wonderful and deep explanation of the fulfillment of that law, of that will of God for everybody. So I hope we all take it to heart in each part and are challenged by it. And today the challenge to you, to me, is to be the salt, to be the light, to have God's law in our heart, that law of love to God and love to others. So God bless you all and have a wonderful day. Remy, have you found any salt licks recently? Let's go check it out.